Hello, everybody, and welcome to IGN's review discussion of The Witcher 3. I am your host, Vince Ingenito. I'm also the guy who had the good fortune of reviewing it for IGN. And with me, I'm joined by three friends who are going to talk about it with me. I got John Ryan.
Hi there.
Brendan Graber.
Hello.
And Max Scoville.
Howdy.
Before we dive into everything, though, let's, in case you missed it, take a look at what my verdict was on The Witcher 3.
Though the straightforward and fetch quest heavy main story overstays its welcome, the option of joyfully adventuring through a rich, expansive open world was always there for me when I'd start to burn out. Even if the plot isn't terribly interesting, the many characters who play a part in it are, and along with the excellent combat and RPG gameplay, they elevate The Witcher 3 to a plane few other RPGs inhabit.
Okay, so why don't we dig into the story of The Witcher 3, which is very substantial, and depending on what your experience is with... Brendan's like, oh
You God, that story, you never come back out.
Yeah, it's very, very meaty. So, and depending on kind of what your experience has been with The Witcher, I feel like you'll have different feelings. We're going to keep this as spoiler-free as we can, folks, but of course, if you're at all sensitive to spoilers, you're worried, which of course I can understand if you are, maybe this is maybe you should come back a little later once you've seen more of it.
Yeah.
But we'll do our best. So now, Max, you have an interesting perspective because I think out of all of us, you've read the most of the books.
Yeah. Well, like most of us, Max can read.
Yeah, Max can read, which is not a skill I have as a writer.
You just write the wikis, but you don't read them. You don't know.
I base everything I read on pictures.
So my experience with The Witcher was I think doing sort of a preview review type of thing for the 360 version of Witcher 2 when that came out, and I jumped into it not really knowing what it was. Kind of just had it thrown in my lap, and I was like, I'll check it out, and it was a little bit much to make sense of right off the bat.
Witcher 2 is a dense game.
It is
especially
not accessible
right from the get-go
to somebody who's just getting right into it. I mean, the enhanced version actually comes with this large, it's a Cliff Notes for The Witcher. So I tried that out. I was kind of like, I don't really get it. Witcher 3 popped up at E3, and I went and saw it, and I was so stunned that I immediately went home and bought the first book of short stories, The Last Wish. I read that faster than most books I've read recently. I just burned through it on 4th of July weekend, and I loved it, fell in love with it, picked up Witcher 2 again, made a lot more sense of it.
Sure.
And since then, I read like half of the first novel, which I didn't like quite as much as the short stories.
Yeah.
Played a good chunk of Witcher 2, didn't actually finish it, but the loading screens are really bad on 360. But I've been really looking forward to Witcher 3, and I've been curious to see how accessible it is to somebody who understands the world, but they've been saying this is a game you can go into without any prior knowledge.
Right.
So I can point at something and say, I don't know what that means. And I feel like I have a pretty good kind of basis for understanding here, but I will say it does a much better job of making itself accessible than 2 did.
Yeah, it definitely, when you go through the story, even if you've never read anything, if you haven't played the first 2 games, I feel like at some point or another they're going to at least kind of explain why you should care or why you should know about this.
Care in particular about Ciri, right?
Well, Ciri, and for the whole thing. Even if it's you see everybody flying the flags of Temeria in Velen, and it's eventually you'll find out why that's important.
Sure.
But it's still, if you're going into it completely cold, it can definitely be a bit daunting in the onset.
I think it also very much falls in line with the whole show don't tell, and also just it has all the information there for you. It just entrusts you to actually give a damn and go after it.
Yep.
A good comparison, I think, would be Mad Max Fury Road, which
Haven't
starts
seen it.
out... Okay, I won't spoil it, but it basically kind of starts off... It does not try to stop and explain who Mad Max is.
Oh, no.
He's a guy. There's stuff
His name is
that's
Max,
messed up.
he is mad.
It's weird. There's some sort of pre-existing conditions there, but it kind of just assumes you're going to pick it up as you go along.
Well, that's the thing that this does really well,
Exactly.
too. I mean, in the first few minutes of the game, you figure out medieval setting, really easy, and they're at war, and there's monsters.
Yeah,
and really, that's all that there is to it.
Yeah,
Now-
you could grab people and be like, hey, what the hell is happening? And they'll tell you.
Or you can look it up in the, they have a kind of a glossary appendix for you to figure stuff out.
big.
But for you, Brendan, I know you played a little bit of Witcher 1, right?
Yeah.
You didn't necessarily play, did you get on Witcher 2 at all?
Nope, not yet.
Right, so you didn't have a lot of experience with the games per se, and no experience with the books either.
No.
So for you, how was that picking up Witcher 3 at first? Did you immediately understand, or at least intrinsically feel like you cared about finding Ciri and Yennefer, or were you kind of like, hey, who are these people and why should I care?
I mean, yeah, there was a certain extent of Ciri who, what now? And then, but I think the whole kind of prologue sequence sets it pretty well. Where okay, this is somebody that my character cares about. I understand why I need to be going after. The cinematic kind of plays on why you need to find Yennefer. So it kind of like sets it up where it's, okay, maybe I don't know who these people are, but I can sense that on this journey I will find out more about them. And I like how they have these little like rewind flashbacks to Ciri. So you get like, not only do you get to know more about her, you get to play as her, and that kind of even gives you more than you would someone just tell you like, oh, hey, by the way, I saw Ciri, bye.
Sure.
And more it's like, oh, hey, Ciri did this, and you get to play it, you see her emotions, you see how she interacts, you get that kind of sense of like, okay, I'm more interested in these characters.
She's a person worth finding.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
you get that sense. Something that I struggled with a little bit in the review is that I played Witcher 1 and 2, haven't read any of the books, and because she's really not mentioned very much in the game, she's like kind of there's a story about her as kind of an Easter egg.
There is
in a tavern in one.
In the
Witcher
main
1.
game in Witcher 2.
No, it's in 2.
Well, I'm just saying, in the flashbacks of Witcher 2, where Geralt regains his memories, there is literally one sentence where her name is mentioned
Right.
once. That's it.
Meanwhile, she is a core character in the
Right.
novels.
In Witcher 3.
And it's the same
yeah.
thing with
And in the novels,
Yennefer
yeah.
as well. You know, I mean, there's like 2 shots of her in a weird little animatic, and that's all you get throughout the first 2 games.
So the fact that kind of the emotional momentum of the Witcher 3 story hinges on Geralt caring so much about finding her. For me, that was challenging. I had trouble caring about that until like later in the game once I knew her better.
But hold on, you're saying, I mean, this is the main campaign, like the main storyline. I
Right.
think it is totally kind of almost disingenuous to insist that an open world game that lets you go wherever you want have one kind of consistent main story. I think that like with Skyrim, for instance, I'm constantly rolling my eyes because my fiance is like, I never beat Skyrim, and I'm like, that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah,
Like,
you played
you
it.
became like the king of the vampires, and you rode a werewolf or whatever. Exactly. Thomas the Tank Engine mod in there, whatever. Like there's all this other stuff there, and to say that the main thing that they show in the trailers is like the story is almost kind of inaccurate. There's so much in The Witcher that really relies on The Witcher just doing his job. And
Yeah.
what's his job? He's like a mercenary ranger monk kind of.
Right.
So it's
Jedi.
like you're just solving weird little problems, and I think it's really like the kind of the bite-sized stuff that I really love. I really love that, and I think that even if you go into this game totally not knowing anything about the world, that stuff is spectacular.
I totally agree with you. And like, I guess the reason I felt it was something that I noticed a little bit more is because as opposed to say something like Skyrim or some other open world games, there's legitimately at least 60 hours of main story. So the main story is a much bigger part of this open world game than it is in other games. But I totally agree with you in the sense that the more bite-sized stuff that's kind of off to the side, and there's so much of it and it's so meaty, that's like the really rich stuff. How did you guys feel? Do you think the side quests of all kinds did a good job of fleshing out the story and the characters, even if you didn't know Ciri or Yennefer that well?
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of going back to what Brendan was saying. Like when you have those, like, for example, not necessarily a side quest, but like those like ancillary missions where like you play as Ciri and you get to have conversations as her. That did a much better job of explaining to me who she is and why she's important. Like just seeing how she answers a question of like, "How was your day?" as opposed to some like old dude being like, "This cutscene's going to show you what the great feats of Ciri are." And it's like that did a much better job for me of explaining who these are. And even if you pick up books and stuff along the way, like little tales of what happened, like I think the world itself and the side quests in particular do a great job of filling in the gaps.
I do think like it's a testament to a developer in an open world setting to have a main story that can survive along with all the side stuff, because that is what a player is going to do. Is they're going to go explore, and hours later go, oh wait, I had that main quest. They have to jump back to it and suddenly get back into this main path. And it's really hard actually to find a main story. Like there's a lot of world games. Not everyone has a great main story to go along with the side stuff, or vice versa. And I think they do a really good job with what they're given of making everything interesting, so that even if you decide to deviate for a while, you're going to have fun. You'll come back and you can pick up where you left off. With like they're always explaining stuff to you. So I never felt lost. I think that's a really good sign of an open world game.
Yeah, absolutely. And overall, even though I wasn't the biggest fan of the overall thrust of the main quest, I totally agree that all the richness, the political intrigue, and the lore, and the history, and the complexity of the world in The Witcher absolutely shines through with all the stuff on the side, kind of creating a tapestry, like this complex, beautiful tapestry that a lot of other open world games and just non-open world games can't really match. And that's all the time we have for now. But for more on what we thought about The Witcher 3, stay right here on IGN.